Well, hello everyone. I am Matt Williamson. How's it going today? I am fired up for football. I'm fired up for Steelers-Falcons. I'm expecting a very good game. I do think getting the Falcons with new coordinators, new head coach, new quarterback coming off injury early in the season is a good thing. I'll give you my prediction here at the end, but first I want to go through all sorts of stuff for when the Steelers have the ball. We did the other side of the ball yesterday. The Steelers only produced 0.294 points per play last year. That was only ahead of the Jets, Giants, Patriots, and Panthers. They averaged 5.0 yards per play, but 5.2 on the road. The Falcons allowed 5.0, but only 4.7 at home. From a yards per drive perspective, the Steelers were 26th, and Atlanta's defense finished 7th. Falcons have finished in the bottom half of the league in scoring defense for 6 straight years. That ties the Panthers for the longest in the league currently. Last year, no team threw the ball a lower percentage on the road than the Steelers. Steelers opponents threw the ball 54% of the time last year. Only 4 defenses saw a lesser percentage of pass plays. Kind of see where we're going here. Pittsburgh's offense was 25th in net passing yards, while the Falcons' defense was 8th best in net passing yards allowed. So for the Broncos last year, Russell Wilson was second amongst qualified quarterbacks of rate of throws behind the line of scrimmage. It's a Wilson thing, and that's also a Peyton thing. Wilson also third highest in rate of throws 20 or more yards downfield. I've told you, he has no irons in his bag. He has a putter and he's got a driver. His 11% rate of throws between 10 and 20 yards was the lowest in the league, and over Wilson's career, his 17% of passes in this range ranks 44th. He also threw for 6.9 yards per attempt last season, the lowest of his career. George Pickens and Deontay Johnson accounted for 54% of the Steelers' receiving yards and 10 of the Steelers' 13 receiving touchdowns. 13 touchdowns. Pickens ran 188 routes last year without Johnson on the field and was targeted on 24% of the routes and averaged 2.94 yards per route run, which would have been near the top of the league. But when Johnson was on the field, he was only targeted 17.5% and only averaged 1.7 yards per route run. Huge difference. Pickens had 4 games with 125 or more receiving yards, but 9 with under 50. 43 wide receivers average more routes per game than Pickens. So I think he's need to run more routes, be more consistent week to week, and I do think that's very possible. The Falcons allowed the 3rd fewest yards per route run to receivers aligned outside the numbers. Pickens also reached a speed of 21.54 miles per hour in Week 16. Only 8 players had recorded a faster time than him. He can move. So Freiermuth, he had 42% of Pittsburgh's end zone targets. That's the highest percentage of all tight ends. Freiermuth only ran a route on 48.6% of Pittsburgh's dropbacks last year after a 68.1% rate the year before. Now, some of that's injuries. He's also been targeted on 20.6% of his career routes, which is 12th most among tight ends since Freiermuth entered the league. While Darnell Washington was on the field for 48% of the offensive snaps in his rookie season, he was targeted just 10 times. Atlanta allowed the 6th most receiving yards per game to the tight end position. That's big. Najee and Warren combined to catch 90 passes for 550 yards. Of all running backs with at least 50 targets, Warren's team target share was the 5th highest in the league, and his targets per route run was 4th. His yards per route run was 5th. The Broncos, remember Wilson was there, led the NFL in receptions by running backs. Wilson also had 195 yards gained by defensive pass interference calls last year, despite not being in those last 2 games. That was still the 4th most in the league. But how about this? Talk about most of the league. Wilson's been sacked 100 times over the past 2 years, most in the league. Justin Fields has taken a league-high 135 sacks since entering the NFL. Over the past 3 seasons, Fields' 3.02 average time to throw is the highest in the league, and a league-low percent of his throws have been released in 2.5 seconds or less. In 2023, Wilson was hit on 20.4% of his dropbacks. That's only behind Will Levis. Fields was the 7th highest in that one. But Steelers only allowed 2.1 sacks per game last year. Only 7 offenses were better. Only one offense used play action at a lower rate than the Steelers last year. That's going to change massively. Wilson threw 11 touchdown passes off play action last year, 2nd highest in the league. Only 5 offenses threw for fewer passing yards than the Steelers, and only the Jets and Panthers, though, threw fewer touchdowns. But only 6 defenses gave up fewer passing yards than Atlanta. On average, the Falcons was targeted 8.58 yards downfield. The only defense with a higher average depth of target were the Rams, Bengals, and Lions. This is bonkers. The Falcons haven't had a defender with double-digit sacks since 2016. And the sack leaders last year, Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell, had 6.5 each, aren't with the team. So I know they traded for Judon, but they've been looking for pass rush forever in Atlanta, and I don't know that they found it. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. If you think you know your stuff, get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool. When the game's over, head over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use our code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, all caps. Bet online. The game starts here. All right, let's get into the running game a little bit. Since week 9 last year, the Steelers averaged over 145 yards per game, rushing. That was 5th most. And they had 13 rushing touchdowns, 2nd most. Pretty good. Harris and Warren combined for 404 carries for 1,819 rushing yards, 1,819 rushing yards, and 12 touchdowns. No other Steeler ball carrier had more than 57 rushing yards. Like, that's going to be different this year. The Lions were the only other team with 2 running backs with a combined 1,000 scrimmage yards. 5.7 of the Steelers' rushing attempts produced gains of 15 or more yards. Only 3 offenses were better. Only 7 offenses generated more yards per carry after first contact than the Steelers. Harris and Warren each averaged 2.4 yards after first contact per rush attempt. That had them tied for 3rd. This is a really good backfield, folks. I know Najee gets some heat, but this is a really good backfield. Harris started his career with 3 straight 1,000-yard rushing seasons, the only Steelers ball carrier in history to accomplish that. He also is the only running back to have a 3-year streak of 1,000-yard seasons in the entire NFL. Along with Joe Mixon, they're the only 2 backs in the league with 1,200 or more scrimmage yards in each of the last 3 years. His explosive run rate was 10th best in the league last year. In the Steelers' wins last year, he averaged 4.3 yards per carry with 8 rushing touchdowns and averaged 3 yards per carry and 0 rushing touchdowns in their losses. Steelers were 7-0 last year when Harris scored a touchdown. Amongst running backs with 100 carries, Warren's 5.3 yards per rush attempt was only behind Devon Achane and Christian McCaffrey. His explosive run rate ranked 3rd, and Warren's yards after first contact per attempt was 2nd. Warren doubled his touches last season over his rookie year. Over the past 2 seasons, he averages 5.1 yards per carry and 3.45 yards after contact compared to 3.9 and 2.9 respectively by Harris. However, Warren is only run into a heavy box 30% of those times compared to 40% for Harris. It's a big deal. When the Steelers had 2 tight ends on the field, Warren averaged 5.7 yards per carry compared to 2.9 by Harris. Small sample size, but still. Harris received 86% of the backfield touches during his rookie year. Then it dropped to 68% the year after that, and 57% the year after that. Still, he's eclipsed 1,200 yards from scrimmage and 8 touchdowns in each of his seasons. And frankly, I thought last year was his best year. Harris outtouched Warren 45-22 in the red zone and 22-9 inside the 10-yard line. Over the 3 seasons that Arthur Smith and Cordell Patterson were together in Atlanta, Patterson averaged 10 touches per game. I think it'll be much less than that. Justin Fields averages 55.5 rushing yards per game since entering the league. Only Lamar Jackson is higher during that time frame. The Falcons allowed the 3rd most rushing yards per game to the quarterback position. However, the Falcons gave up just 3.8 yards per carry to running backs, which was 6th best, and only 17% of running backs' runs resulted in a first down or touchdown, which was best in the league. 55% of the Steelers' touchdowns came on the ground last year. That was the highest rate in the league. That kind of needs to change. Remember, throwing touchdowns. Atlanta's defense has created 3 and out on 26% of their drives. That was the 5th best in the league. The Steelers' offense went 3 and out 27% of the time, 4th worst. Lastly, per EPA, only the Bengals and Colts faced a tougher slate of opposing defenses last year than the Steelers. Doesn't explain everything, but you got to have some context here. If you play the hardest group of defenses in the league, it's not going to be great. And we talked about that as the season was going on. Now, I don't think this Falcons defense is particularly formidable. I really think you're going to see a high level of football when the Falcons have the ball on both sides of the ball. Those are the 2 best units for sure. And when the Steelers have the ball, they're the 2 worst units. It's going to be a work in progress. I do think Pittsburgh will run on them pretty well, although I have some O-line concerns for this game and the status of the Steelers' O-line. So my fear for the Steelers is if they get down early and have to throw, because I think that would be trouble, although Atlanta's pass rush isn't great. I think there'll be a lot of Steeler fans there, and I think they win this game. But it's going to be really close. It could come down to a field goal. I have the Steelers winning 17-16 in a grinded out, fair amount of punts. Steeler defense sort of rules the day. But Atlanta's offense is scary. All right, everyone. Take care. We will reconvene after Steelers-Falcons. See ya.